Hello BookTube, welcome back to my channel. My name is Juan. I am just one reader, your favorite Mexican booktuber who reads in English, and today I have for you a very unpopular review of The Will of the Many by James Islington. This book is so popular right now. I haven't seen anyone talk badly about this book. Not even badly, just like be really critical about it. Like every single review, opinion, Goodreads, Amazon, YouTube, anywhere and everywhere that I've looked for reviews of this book, it's pretty much positive. Like people are usually incredibly, glowingly positive about this book, The Will of the Many by James Islington. I recently did a reading vlog on this book, so if you want to see even more of my thoughts on this book, you can go and check that video out. It was a lot of fun, even though I did not end up liking or enjoying the book at all. This book receives 2 stars from me, which is, I think, a pretty good rating. I don't think it's a bad book. I think it's just a nothing book. I will say that. And you know what? I can already see the hate comments, the death threats coming in, just like, when Harry Potter receives the letters from Hogwarts, just like raining down, like pouring down from the ceiling. That's that's what I'm ready for. I'm ready to take in all of that hate. I am no stranger to hate or really negative comments on my videos, especially when it comes to attacking, because that's what some people think this is, attacking great epic fantasy that is really popular and on trend at the moment. I have the most popular and the most watched video that I've ever made is my review of, my rant, my negative rant on Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings, which is one of the most frustrating books I've ever read in my life. And let me tell you, making that video has made me so strong because I've received a lot of hate and a lot of like almost death threats for criticizing that book and that author. So I know what I'm getting into with this review. This review here is just going to be really short. It's going to be a summary, a synthesis of what I've already mentioned in my reading vlog, which is like the longer extended cut of this video, if you will. So I will just tell you what the book is about, what I did like and what I didn't like. That's it. And what else should you read if you want to read this, or if you have actually enjoyed this. Okay, so The Will of the Many is a new book, and the first book in this new trilogy, Hierarchy, written by James Islington. He's an Australian author, and he has, I think, previously written another trilogy, the Lycanius trilogy, I think it is. Yeah. And he hasn't really received high praise for that trilogy. I've heard pretty mixed things about it. And so when this new book, The Will of the Many, came out, people were just amazed. They were applauding the author for having written something far superior to his previous trilogy. I haven't read that trilogy myself. I'm not going to. So I cannot really attest to how he has grown as a writer. I will just base my opinions on what I read here now. Okay, so the book, The Will of the Many, is set in this world that is sort of very inspired by the Roman Empire. It has that kind of vibe you can see from the cover. Spoiler alert, the best thing about the book is the cover art. that should be the headline for my review. The cover is the best thing about it. But it is. So it's set in that kind of world. There's this kind of social, political structure where the people who are at the top of the power pyramid, hierarchy, whatever, they sort of drain the lower levels of society of the will. The will is this kind of vague, unexplained, like life force, magic, energy. I don't know what it is, but that's how they get their power. There's this kind of magic system that has to do with that power structure and draining people from the will. And then we follow this character who is an orphan. We know this from the very first chapter, so this is not a spoiler. He's an orphan, and he is sort of disguising himself to be someone he's not, and circumstances put him into a very interesting, complicated position in which he has to go to this like magic school, academy, sort of to train and play this kind of game, battle, Hunger Games kind of thing. And I won't say more in terms of the plot. So what did I like? What did I dislike? So the first thing is the cover. The cover is beautiful. It's what actually made me consider reading the book. I was like, well, a book with that great a cover needs to be interesting. Boy, was I mistaken. I will say that the people who marketed this book, 10 out of 10. You are doing your job. You convinced me to purchase this book. It's beautifully packaged. It's beautifully, produced as an object. But what's inside leaves a lot to be desired, sadly. So the best thing is the cover. Also, in terms of marketing, I should say this book is YA. It's young adult fiction. It sort of is masquerading as adult fiction, fantasy, which it's not. It's really not. It's 100% in the same realm as the Hunger Games, I would say. So it is YA, sort of masquerading as adult fiction, but I will say kudos for the marketing department because they managed to actually make me buy this book, which was a pretty expensive hardcover. Anyway, another thing that I think is okay about the book is its plot. I actually think this book has a decent, interesting, I was going to say engaging plot, but it's not really engaging. At least it wasn't to me. It was just action-packed. And that's really what I didn't like about the book, that it should be engaging, it should be exciting, but it never was. It was just a series of things that happened with no emotional impact whatsoever. Anyway, so the plot is decent, things happen, it moves along nicely, it has a decent pacing. It has recognizable, very, very, very recognizable tropes, which I think is a good thing because tropes are there for a reason. I think it's a pattern of storytelling premises and characters and stereotypes that are recognizable enough and that they make the story accessible, they make the story interesting and familiar. It's a book that is easy to grasp and get familiar with, if that makes sense. And yeah, I think the book is good in terms of it has some twists and turns. Like I said, the story moves along. So in terms of the plot, I would say it's not a bad book. Now, that's it. That's it for my positive review of The Will of the Many. Everything else that I have to say is pretty negative. Okay. So the first thing that I don't like about this book is the character work. It has characters. Some of them, like I said, are very recognizable tropes of characters, stereotypical characters. But the problem was there's nothing really there in terms of characterization. So it has characters, but nothing really three-dimensional about them. This is particularly true and sorely true and really disappointingly true for the main character whose name I've even forgotten. What's his name? Anyway, I don't even care. He's a character that is just insufferable because he's a little like Quoth from The Name of the Wind, but at least Quoth was well written and he was kind of a prick, but he was interesting. This character is not interesting, and that's what I mean. You can write the most disgusting, despicable characters like the HBO show Succession, but if they are interestingly portrayed and their conflicts are interesting, I love reading about these characters. But this was just the most uninteresting character. He was too good at everything. He was perfect. He had like no flaws. His backstory is just very meh. So it's a very mid kind of book in terms of characterization, or lack thereof, I should say. So another negative thing about the book I thought was its setting and world building and magic system, or again, lack thereof. The book, like I said, is inspired by this kind of ancient Greece, Rome, Roman Empire, like that kind of vibe that you can see from the columns here. And you sort of get that from time to time, but I just felt like the world and the magic, everything felt very bland. It felt very washed out. I could never really picture anything in the book. Like it just fell flat for me. Nothing vivid or lively or visually interesting, or not necessarily visually, but there was just nothing that made me really care about the setting or the world that was depicted. Now, in terms of the magic system is one of the most disappointing aspects of this book, in my opinion. Let me have some coffee. Caffeine, yeah. I think it was just very disappointing, the magic system. The will. This is the titular will. It's on the title of the fucking book. Sorry for cussing, but it's in the title of the book, so it should be really relevant and really interesting. And it is relevant, but it's both vague and at the same time completely uninteresting. So I never really cared about the will. Every single time that it was mentioned or that it was brought up, I was like, oh my god. It's a little Brandon Sanderson-y in terms of the author. James Islington tries to explain in very academical, theoretical ways the concepts of the will, but it's so unclear, incomprehensible, and frankly uninteresting that it was just like, oh my god. It felt geekish just for the sake of being geekish. And I hated that because it was like reading a scientific concept that is completely alien to me. So everything felt flat. And now the real flaws in this book, because so far what I've mentioned, I don't think is that bad. Like, many people could read this book and feel satisfied. Many people have, for some reason. But I think this book was so frustrating to me, specifically to me, because of the writing. That's this book's fatal flaw. The biggest disappointment was the writing itself. The writing is so serviceable. There's no sense of style, no personal flair coming from the author. There's no authorial voice. There's no voice in this book. At least I never got it. I never got the spark from the author. I never felt like there was an author telling me a story, whispering a story into my ear, casting a spell upon me and making me pay attention. That was never there. It never happened, and that's, I think, the first thing that any book should do with its audience, especially in fantasy. So I thought the writing was just really, really bland, cardboard paper kind of writing, just incredibly soulless. Like it had nothing to it. It was just very declarative sentences. Also, something that this book does that is so amateurish, in my opinion, was there's a rule in writing of show, don't tell. Well, this book doesn't care. This book tells you everything and shows you very little. It tells way more than it should. So, reading about something is not the same as like getting immersed and figuring out and understanding, which is something that I just cannot forgive. I cannot forgive how much this book told instead of showed. Also, there was an epilogue at the end, which I really, really hated because it was so manipulative. It was like the author maybe realized that the book was so meh, so mid, that people were never gonna care enough to buy the second book. And so he artificially created this epilogue, which has a very cheap narrative device to really surprise you and make you interested in, oh my god, what is this? I need to check out the second book in the series. I need to get another expensive hardcover. So I really, really hated how manipulative that move felt to me. And yeah, I would just say that the fatal flaw of this book and this author is that there's just no soul, no life, no vitality to it, to the right, and that comes down to the writing. The writing makes you care. And I said it in my reading vlog previously. A book can be imperfect and yet have a life, and that's what many of Robin Hobb's books do. They can be really imperfect, but they are so alive that you read the entire series of 17 books because it's great. You really care about what's going on and the characters and everything, even though sometimes the execution is not great. This is the opposite. This has no soul. I actually said in my reading vlog that this book felt to me like it was created by AI, artificial intelligence. Like that's how this book felt to me. Completely paint by the numbers plot and characters with recognizable tropes, but no human sensitivity, life, or vitality. There was no color it was just like a gray wall or a white wall. It was just, there was nothing to it. So there was no sense of awe, no sense of wonder, no sense of discovery, no sense of anything. That's why I am giving this book 2 stars. So that's my review of The Will of the Many. I know that this this video is probably gonna get me killed. So goodbye. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say, I think instead of reading The Will of the Many, you should read Robin Hobb's The Soldier Son trilogy. This is book 1, Shaman's Crossing. Book 2, Forest Mage, is one of the most spectacular fantasy books I've read in my life. It's a really, really interesting, beautiful, well-drawn, well-thought-out, super fascinating and unique fantasy series that I think people are not reading enough. And it really, really hurts me that so many people are singing the praises of stuff like The Will of the Many, which is frankly underwhelming at best, serviceable, and just bad, in my opinion. And they are not paying attention to stuff like this. Now, some people have problems with Robin Hobb's writing, but at least it's so alive and so vivid and so different. And yeah, I just cannot believe that people are not reading this and they are reading this and Brandon Sanderson's fucking books. Anyway, I am still in my forever journey of finding interesting, beautifully written, vivid, surprising, fascinating fantasy series. So maybe this time I will find a good one. Maybe this time.
Everybody loves a winner, so nobody loves
are, they're in my favor. Something's bound to begin. It's gonna happen sometime. Maybe this time I'll win. 'Cause everybody, they love a winner. So nobody loved me. Lady peaceful, lady happy, that's what I long to be. Oh, the odds are they're in my favor. Something's about to begin. It's gonna happen sometime. Maybe this